In the previous session, we introduced the concept of the relationship and described its internal and external characteristics. We concluded our depiction of creation with the crossing of a creative threshold. The universe became an entity of consciousness poised for the development of more complex internal and external structure, an entity defined by the existence of the relationship. This is Session 6, Atoms, Molecules, and the Cosmos, in a course titled Evolution of Consciousness, and that is central to a larger view, Evolution of Consciousness theory. In this session, we further develop the creative process and describe how this process brought forth atomic, molecular, and cosmic structure. Such takes our depiction to a climax, to the threshold that marked the end of the universe's age of stellar complexification. Up to this point in our depiction of evolution, the relatively simple nature of the universe made it possible to present a definite scenario of evolutionary events. In the period of evolutionary advancement that we are about to explore, such specificity is no longer possible or necessary. To understand this, we need to expand our model of the creative process. Earlier, we described the creative process in terms of the creative cycle and the creative threshold, the mechanism of the creative process. As the consciousness that is the universe increased, the expression of this mechanism became more flexible. In our expanded model of the creative process, the creative threshold not only represents a leap to a more advanced evolutionary level, but a crossroads or a turning point. It is the pivotal moment at which the universe has the potential to set forth in one of a number of alternative evolutionary directions. What, then, determines these alternative evolutionary directions? We can think of evolution as delineated by a series of thresholds. Most denote minor shifts in evolutionary direction. A few denote major shifts. In either case, the alternative evolutionary directions available at each juncture are established by those that came before. The expansion of consciousness, in the universe's first evolutionary stage, made possible the doubling of entities of consciousness, in the universe's second evolutionary stage, which made possible the formation of relationships, in the universe's third evolutionary stage. New evolutionary levels are built on old evolutionary levels. This explains why there are only a limited number of alternative evolutionary directions available at each juncture, but what determines the actual course to follow? To understand this, we must embrace an idea made possible by growing autonomy and consciousness, freedom. Within the range of alternative evolutionary directions, there is no set mechanism to determine the course to follow. The process is distinguished by a pattern of groping and trial and error. To behave as such is the nature of consciousness. The more evolved the consciousness, the greater its freedom of action. The notion of freedom compels us to incorporate an additional idea into our model of the creative process, that of evolution's leading arrow and trailing arrow. If at each threshold, the creative process branches in one of a number of alternative evolutionary directions, and, by virtue of trial and error, the direction taken need not be right, what happens to the incorrect evolutionary lines that result? What happens to everything created that has no enduring value in the end game of evolution? With freedom, the leading arrow of creativity brings into existence the new, that which has never before existed. To accommodate freedom, the trailing arrow of creativity reshapes and discards prior evolutionary forms in support of the leading edge of advance. Like a two-edged sword, the creative process builds on the old, to thrust evolution to higher stages of consciousness. As it does, earlier stages reshape in support, or, the remnants of once leading-edge evolution, fall from existence. Armed with our expanded model of the creative process, we return to the universe's evolutionary period of cosmic formation, the age of cosmogenesis. Cycle after cycle, threshold after threshold, with all the characteristics we now associate with the creative process, relationships perceived one another and individual entities as the object of their need to create fulfillment, and, by doing so, formed more intricate and conscious relationships. These relationships perceived one another and earlier aspects of consciousness, as object, to form still more complex and conscious arrangements. With each threshold, the universe built on its previous level of organization to grope to a higher level of organization. As the creative process thrust evolution to new levels, earlier levels reshaped in support, or, if no longer needed, vanished from existence. This internal becoming manifested in the emergence of a series of familiar external forms. About 15 billion years ago, quarks came into existence, as did electrons and other indivisible particles. Soon after, protons and neutrons formed and came together to create the first atomic nuclei, the nucleus of the atom. About 300,000 years later, nuclei captured electrons to form the first hydrogen and helium atoms. About 700,000 years after emergence, hydrogen atoms came together to create the first hydrogen molecules. The leading edge of evolution jumped to a celestial scale, where, not long after molecular development, the first clouds of stellar gas aggregated, composed of hydrogen and helium. About 1 billion years after emergence, the first celestial bodies formed, objects, that with their luminescence, we would call stars. About 2 billion years after emergence, the first protogalaxies took shape. During the next 5 billion years, the first galaxies, galactic clusters, and higher levels of order came into existence. Evolution's leading edge returned to the microscopic, where, about 8 billion years ago, the first heavy elements came into existence, followed by ionic compounds. Not long after, evolution's forward arrow returned to the macroscopic, and the first solar systems that contained planets made from heavy elements and ionic compounds organized. The time-space fabric of the universe is a manifestation of the internal, a construct of consciousness in transformation. Between thresholds, we have advancement on a given evolutionary level. Across thresholds, we jump to a new evolutionary level. When, for example, the creative process lifted the structure of perception that we associate with the subatomic particle across the threshold to the structure of perception that we associate with the atomic nucleus, the focus of evolution left subatomic formation. It engaged in proton and neutron arrangement and gave rise to nuclei. In support, the subatomic level realigned and non-essential particles fell into obsolescence. Physicists have identified a great number of subatomic particles, but only the proton, neutron, electron, and a handful of others exist under any but the most high energy and thus primitive evolutionary conditions. One may ask, how many alternative evolutionary directions were tried, abandoned, and tried again, before nuclei and electrons combined to form the first atom, or before atoms combined to form the first molecule? How many paths were charted, abandoned, and resurrected before the universe struck on the remarkable system of relationships that characterizes subatomic, atomic, and simple molecular structure, and that made possible the future in which we exist? Where no remnants remain, we may never know the branches of the universe's cosmic ascent. What we do know is that, as the creative process brought forms of greater autonomy and consciousness into existence, a heavens closer to the one we observe took form. The growing relativity of time-space manifested in particle arrangements that embodied the characteristics we associate with matter. The growing differentiation between local and overall cyclic behavior manifested in the effect of movement of a physical object in motion through space. Structure of perception manifested in bonding, attraction, and repulsion. The four forces of physics, the strong, weak, electromagnetic, and gravitational forces, came into play. Stars, planets, and galaxies displayed familiar patterns of movement and association. In the cosmos, we find subatomic particles, atoms, molecules, and ionic compounds. We find stars, planets, solar systems, galaxies, galactic clusters, and walls of galactic clusters. We find quasars, pulsars, black holes, and white dwarfs. What mechanism other than the creative process could account for this evolution? What mechanism other than the creative process has the capacity to unite mathematical certitude with creative freedom in a way that explains the universe's order and diversity. If we could transport ourselves back in time and witness the evolution of the cosmos, if we could view the internal alongside the external, would we not be looking into the expanding consciousness that was the universe? Would we not be looking into the emerging mind that was creation? Cosmogenesis, however, was not without its end. Time accelerated, and the fabric of space became more intricate and interwoven. Then, about 5 billion years ago, the universe reached the point in evolution where it exhausted its potential to create fulfillment through cosmic formation. Uncertainty overwhelmed and collapsed. Consciousness turned in on itself and embraced itself as what it had become. All that we today take to be the cosmos fell into the realm of evolution's trailing arrow. Creation's forward arrow locked on a new line of evolutionary advance. The universe crossed the threshold to the evolutionary stage of the complex molecule and simple metabolic system. Can the four fundamental forces defined by physics account for the order and diversity we observe in the cosmos? As a creative process, must not cosmogenesis have a limit? With our look at atoms, molecules, and the cosmos, we complete Session 6 in our course titled Evolution of Consciousness. We have established the background to reconcile our evolution of consciousness view with that of science, and to set forth into a more advanced period of the universe's becoming, a stage defined by the rudiments of the organic. Our course, titled Evolution of Consciousness, continues in Session 7, Design over Structure.